I'm Kunal Chandiramani, the entrepreneur in residence for the Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Cal State Long Beach. And I'm alongside Brendan Rogers, a dear friend, co-founded Wag, raised over $300 million in venture capital, runs a VC fund, 2AM VC, focused on investing in India with US LPs, and does so much cool stuff. Thank you for taking our time.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Brendan, you've been on all parts of the journey, from building a company to raising money to now giving money when people are raising money, for lack of a better way to phrase it. So, what's your journey been like?
Yeah, so started off, went to Silicon Valley in 2011. My grandmother had a tax return, and she gave all of her grandkids $1,200, and I was one of the grandkids, and I'm absurdly grateful for that. I actually spoke to her yesterday, and we were reminiscing on that. But took the money and ran straight to Palo Alto. And my first business was in the online dating space. So when Facebook opened up their API in 2008, 2009, there was a ton of game companies that built games on top of Facebook. So Farmville, from Zynga, and etc. And I basically built an online dating social game, essentially. That business got acquired by IAC Media in late 2013. And then in 2014, I moved to Los Angeles, and there was a bunch of dog walkers in Los Angeles, and seeing how much traffic there is on the roads and how hot it can get in LA, there was a need for connecting dog walkers to pet parents. So started a business called Wag, which essentially the concept in the beginning was having a dog walker in your pocket. And now that business is the button on your phone for your paw, and really owning the whole stack of a pet.
That is incredible. Talking about when you were building the company as a first-time founder and raising money as a first-time founder, how was that experience?
Yeah, so I think raising money as a founder is a very unique experience, especially if you don't have a network or you don't have any experience or around people that have experience raising money. So there's a lot of trial and error and really throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks. And I think that a lot of founders that raise money have to essentially speak to a lot of people. And I go to this example a lot, but I think Airbnb talked to 100 investors for their seed round, and they ended up with maybe less than 10. I don't know the exact number, but what it was a lot of reaching out, cold emails, reaching out to individuals that we think could provide a lot of value, not from an investment perspective, but just a mentorship and just value add perspective. And really understanding and working with these individuals and understanding what investors are looking for, what milestones to hit, etc.
So who was your first investor?
There was my grandmother. So my first business, I went through an accelerator called 500 Startups, and they were the first, I would say, institutional investor, and that was actually a really interesting accelerator and experience. I haven't really talked about this publicly, but it's very similar to Y Combinator. So 3-month program, you get a lot of mentorship. You get to meet a lot of awesome like-minded founders, and then at the end of the 3 months you have a demo day. So they were the first investor, and honestly, if you're a first-time founder, going the accelerator route could be a really good option for you, especially if you've never been in a startup before or whatnot. So that was the first investor.
That's cool. So as a first-time founder, approaching so many founders who are building their first company right now, how was that experience of approaching an investor for the first time?
Very, very nerve-wracking, because I think that a lot of first-time founders, they think that they put investors on a pedestal, and they think that the investor has all kind of the keys to the kingdom, and what I realized later on in life, and I'm sure we'll get to it, is that like there's a lot of money in this world, and just because you can get somebody to invest in you doesn't make them a good investor, nor can they provide value that is actually going to move a needle for you in the business to get to the next step. So again, there's a lot of different ways to attract investors. There's a lot of different ways to get advice from investors, but I would say, kind of drop your ego. And what I tell everybody is like, when you ask for money, you get advice, but when you ask for advice, you get money. So if you're a first-time founder and maybe you haven't gone live yet with your product, or maybe you have a little bit of traction, just reach out to angel investors, reach out to other founders, and just be a sponge and just get as much feedback and get as many data points as possible, so you can then learn from that and then go beyond.
So that is incredible, because as a first-time founder, talking about the accelerator route versus raising a friends and family round or an angel round, how do you like per se go towards the thought process of choosing between them?
So I think first and foremost, you have to put your own money into the business, whether that's a small amount or a larger amount. And I think that actually shows in your fundraise, is that you've put your own skin in the game. And then the next step is asking your close friends and family. And I think that's a really good exercise to show if you have the ability to fundraise, is can you go to your cousin and ask for money? Do you have to take that money? Not necessarily, but it's a good exercise to know that you're in a very uncomfortable place, and you'll get a lot of different emotions and feelings and feedback. But I think that's very important for founders to do, is immediately go to your friends and family. And then to choose if the accelerator route is good for you. I think optionality is probably the best answer. So I think you should apply to accelerators, but I also think you should talk to angel investors and just see what's working and what's not working, and then kind of weigh against your options. I wouldn't just put all my eggs in one basket.
So I think something a lot of founders struggle with is getting comfortable with asking for money. Just because I think growing up, there's so much taboo around asking for money.
I think that the number one superpower you can have as a founder, in which you will know if you can be a founder or not if you are shameless. If you are not shameless from day one, you should not be a founder. Because you're not, again, early stage or first time founders, they put investors on a pedestal. And if you think about it, you're providing an amazing opportunity to an investor. And the investor should be very grateful to have the opportunity to invest in you, which means that you have to believe that. You have to know that your business and what you're creating and the pain point that you're solving needs to exist in the world. And when you have that belief and you have that thought process, shamelessness comes with that. And you should not care, because you're providing the ultimate opportunity to somebody. And if you are afraid to ask somebody for money, or if you are afraid to ask somebody for advice or whatever, then being a founder may not be for you right now, and that's totally okay. There's other ways to get to becoming a founder, and that's either going to work for a startup that is, that's going from 0 to 1, to get that experience, to be in that environment, to have that energy, etc.
I love that. So I think another area, when raising money, an area which a lot of founders do struggle with is distinguishing the different types of capital, and what it comes with, compared to what an angel check implies compared to what a VC check implies compared to what an accelerator and a demo day model implies.
Yeah, so typically angel investors write less than $50,000 checks. I've been able and been very grateful to raise from very, very, very high net worth families that have capacity to write very large checks. However, they are very price disciplined, and they only write $25,000 angel checks, at least for the first round. So, the distinguishing between VC check sizes and angel check sizes is usually typically VCs, especially like micro VCs, are about $100,000 and above. Or in angels, I would probably say, let's just say 100,000 or less, but typically angels invest 50,000 or less. And there is math behind that, because if you're an angel investor and say you have $250,000 to invest in startups, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, right? You want to spread across, because if you know what power law is, the more you invest in, you have the higher probability of really getting that alpha, and all you need is one hit. So the check sizes are a little smaller with angels. But one thing that I think founders confuse about angels is like just the money. It's always just like the money. Angel investors, specifically value add angel investors, they go way beyond the money. They, especially like if you're building a business, in the say in the pet space, and you want angels that have invested in pet companies before. You want founders that have built big pet companies before, because they've gone through that journey. They can bring so much more value than my cousin that owns a car dealership. So I would say, like, really, when you source angels, know that their check size is going to be smaller, but really strive for angels and build your network around value add individuals that can get you to that 0 to 1 and help you with things that you may not be super familiar with.
Talking about like the accelerator route and the venture capital route, all these different routes, like as a founder, how would you recommend, like outside of the capital, how would you recommend going through and deciding which route you want to go down?
Yeah, so I'm speaking just from a tech perspective. If you're trying to sell t-shirts online, you may not need, venture capital funds, and you may not even be venture capital capable, or the business rather, and you may not need angel investors, maybe just friends and family for that matter. But if you're building a software business or a tech business, typically the reason why VC funds, and at least early stage angels, is absurdly important is because then you have the ability to really scale the business, and that capital will allow you to scale, etc. To figure out like what path to go down, I would say if you're building in the tech space, software, if you're building any sort of like fintech product, marketplace, consumer, whatever the case may be, then I would highly recommend going down the venture route, just so you have the ability to scale the business. And then also you can have amazing board members that have a ton of experience that can help you get to the next step and help you grow the business. But first and foremost, if you and your co-founder are building, let's say like a B2B SaaS tool or whatever, I would say first and foremost is you want to obviously you're going to put your own money in to get it off the ground. And the second thing is I would ask your friends and family, like we talked about earlier. It's a really good exercise. But then also apply to the accelerators, get feedback, go through that process, and then in parallel, what I think a really good exercise is go on Crunchbase, which is owned by TechCrunch, the big tech publication. And Crunchbase is basically a database of all the startups that have been created, at least that have been registered, and you can see who's invested at what round in these startups. So if you're building a B2B SaaS tool, you can say, go on Google, type in like the last 100 funded B2B SaaS companies, and then you get these names of these SaaS companies, and then you go on Crunchbase and you go on their profile, because probably 90% of them are on Crunchbase, and then you see who invested in their seed rounds. And then you click on the seed round, and then you see all the angels, and then typically those angels have a profile, and then you click on LinkedIn, the LinkedIn icon, and then you get brought to their LinkedIn page. And then what you want to do is you want to send them a connection request and send them an email saying, such and such, we go to such and such school, we work at such and such company, we're building this tool, we have 5,000 users, we have 100 paying customers, and then A/B test different messages and send these messages to these individuals. But you're not asking for money. You're asking for you want advice. You want to build your network. You want to get on the phone with these individuals and introduce yourself and get value and get feedback, etc. And that's the first step, and that's what I would do.
I love that. And like, it's just like the network effect just beyond the money is so, especially in the startup space, it's just such a small world.
It is such a small world, and what I realized as well early on is that like if you have a believer in you, like if you have usually people that angel invest know other angels.
Yeah.
And some of these angels have started their own businesses that have done really, really well, and they have co-founders or they have other investors that they've raised from, and there can be a network effect where if one person's in, 5 other people are in. So when you go down that path of just getting feedback, getting data points, and you start, once you have that data and you realize like, oh wow, like we have a lot of interest in people in what we're building, then you can, the next step of that would be like, okay, well, I want to raise my seed round or my pre-seed round. And typically pre-seed rounds, I may date myself because I heavily invest in India now, and the rounds or sizes are definitely different in India than they are in the US, but I would say a pre-seed round is like, in the US, is probably sub $1 million. And then I would say a seed round is probably north of $1 million in the US. You want to basically create a product roadmap and then a milestone roadmap of where you want your business to be within the next year, and include like how many people you need to hire to get to these milestones, what traction numbers do you want to get to, and then based on that you can then come up with kind of a number of how much you want to raise. And for an example, if you come up with this number of, we want to raise $500,000, so within the next year we can hire 2 more engineers, we can do some marketing, we can just A/B test different things to grow the product and whatnot. Then you can once you have that number, then when you have this group of angels that you've been talking to, you can say, oh, by the way, we are raising our round, it's a $500,000 round, and then you can start getting commitments for that round.
Nice. So like, talking about now, taking the flip side, about talking about it from your role as a venture capitalist now. When you look at startups, like how does the math work as a venture capitalist?
Yeah, so I have an early stage fund, which means that we do a lot more bets than late stage funds because we write smaller check sizes. So for me, my math is, I invest in a lot more companies, and what that means is I get less ownership, but I invest at really the beginning of the founder's journey at lower valuations. So I get decent amount of ownership, and then the goal is to have these companies really break out, and then when they get to the later stages, then my entry point, my $300,000 check will hopefully 100 plus X. That's the goal. So really you don't need, it would be great to have them all go 100 plus X, but the math is you only really need a few, to really really exponentially, multiply the fund.
And that's really interesting. Like moving into when you're making bets, given that you're looking for 100 bagger, what would be like, what are things that you've seen in your past 100 baggers that you look for in the next 100 bagger?
Yeah, so at my stage, it's really about, first and foremost, it's the team. I think that, I invest, I'm the first check, I'm usually the lead investor, and I bring in other angels or other funds. We are first and foremost betting on, do the founders have the ability to launch a product, scale a product, hire individuals, and get people around the product, and grow the product, and have the ability to get to that next step, and we help the founders get to the next step. And the way that you diligence that when you speak to founders is like, what has the founder done before? So there's, a really good profile is, say you graduated school and you worked at a startup for 2 years and you were employee number 23, and now that company, has 1,000 employees, and you were able to see that run up. Those are skills that you can't learn at business school. You have to be in the trenches to really learn that. So that's like that's a specific data point that we look at. A lot of failed entrepreneurs, meaning like they've started many businesses and they keep going. That's a great sign. The founder of Instacart, Purva Mehta, he started like 22 businesses before Instacart. The guy started Instacart at like 23, 24. So he's consistently launching businesses. He's failing fast. And it took him 21 tries to get to Instacart. So seeing a founder's background is them launching businesses, and that doesn't mean you have, that individual has to go launch like 20 SaaS companies. Maybe they launched a t-shirt company. Maybe they launched a consulting firm. And then also like there is a piece around education, I think is somewhat powerful. I think that education doesn't matter where you go, but if an individual has gone to an institution that is very hard to get into, there are signs of discipline, there are signs of like passion that this individual has shown to get into these institutions. Not all cases, but we do take that into consideration as well too. And then also like the way that they like articulate the TAM that they're going after, and really do they understand do they truly believe that there's a pain point that they're trying to solve? Do they really understand what they're building, and do they ooze the passion that they are meant to be on this earth to build this business? Because there's a lot of founders that will just build to build, and you can see through that. So I would say those are the initial things, and when those filters, at least at my stage, allows you to get rid of a lot of the noise.
So where do you think is also the sweet spot to raise early stage venture capital, like pre-product, after getting the first few customers, or just post-product? Where have you found the sweet spot to be?
That's a great question. I think if you're a serial entrepreneur, meaning you started more than one business and have had success, I think pre-product, pre-launch that's in your favor to raise money. I think if you're a first-time founder and you've never raised any money, and you're not live, I would not try to raise a round of financing. Again, build your network, talk to angels, ask for advice at that stage. I think like when you're ready to raise capital is at least, and then there's also like where the markets are. So like 2020, 2021, there's so much liquidity where like people are just throwing money. Now we're in a different market, so the bar is a lot higher, and now you're seeing that like profitability is really mattering, early on in the company's journey and stuff. So I would say if you're a first-time founder, pre-product, pre-launch, get advice, build your network, and get something live and get people around it. But from a traction perspective, I think that's depending on really what you're building. But if you're building a SaaS tool and you have a couple customers, even if they're paying or not, like you have people that shown interest that are using your product, those are really good signs of having the readiness to raise financing and stuff.
So, like, now taking a stage again from your perspective of building Wag into the company it is today, and Wag recently went public, and before that you raised over 300 million in venture capital. So going through so many stages of raising money as a founder, how were the different stages? How was Series A different from seed, and Series B different from Series A?
I think that when you get from seed to Series A, so Series A investors, they also write seed checks, but true Series A investors typically stay in their lane, and they write anywhere from $3 to $10 million checks in Series A. That's typically what the rounds are. Really speaking from an India lens, when you raise Series A, there is a lot more data that has to be pulled, and it is very more calculated on the growth and the traction that you have, and also forecasting future growth. So at the seed round, it is less about data because there's not that much data, if any. But Series A is a different beast because then you have to show the traction, you have to show data, you have to show the forecasting for future growth, and the bar is a lot higher. So I think in 2011, 2012, 2013, when I moved to Silicon Valley, there was something called the Series A crunch. Have you heard of this?
I haven't, no.
So there's like a huge wave of startups that get funded pre-seed seed, but then there's like this massive gap to get to Series A because they haven't been able to hit their milestones. So they fall in this abyss of like not being able to raise Series A, and they may not be profitable, or if they are profitable, they're not making that much money, and there's only so much money in the bank.
Yeah.
So then there's only so much runway.
Yeah.
So that from seed to Series A, there's a huge amount of percent of startups that fail. And that's probably where the most startups fail. And then to get from Series A to Series B, I would say is like, if you can get over the last hump, it's almost like Everest, where like there's a point of Everest where it's like the last climb. And in my eyes, what I've seen is if you can get to Series B and have great metrics, have great profitability, then you have a absurdly higher chance of success than at Series A.
So if a founder decides to raise venture capital, what would be things to keep in mind?
If what?
If a founder decides to raise venture capital, like what would be things to keep in mind? Like potentially having to raise another round soon from an investing point of view, what would be things the founder should keep in mind?
Yeah, I think it's just like again, like you raise your seed round and you were able to have amazing metrics, grow, and now you're ready for Series A. Typically, your seed investors will prepare you and help you grow to get to that Series A, and then they'll start providing introductions to Series A investors, and then hopefully that process can move fairly quickly. But from a time perspective, it's really about growth and traction. I mean, I have a portfolio company that launched, and within 6 months they had so many sales where all these investors were like, myself included and other investors were like, you found a channel that works, you found a massive pain point that you're doing phenomenally well. Like, if we add more capital to this business can grow even more. And that was like in 8 months, 9 months. So there are those inflection points, and I think that work. And that's when you bring in value add investors, because they'll have the ability to help you with that process and allow you to get underneath the hood and share look, let's hit these numbers before we go out to raise Series A. So it's all depending on kind of the traction and the growth and stuff like that, and also where the markets are. I also think a lot of fundraising is timing. You have markets that are just up and to the right, and people are just throwing money at you, or there's sectors that are really hot. And an example right now would be AI. AI is a sector where people, founders, are raising money because AI is such a hot topic, and there's so much mass adoption now with AI and stuff like that. So if you hit these tailwinds, it could be in your favor.
So now moving again to the lens of a venture capitalist. So and really simplifying down venture capital for someone who's really for a founder trying to understand the end of how venture capital works and how we see things. How would you say venture capital really works at its base, from raising money to investing?
Yeah, so the way the kind of the fund structure works is you go raise from limited partners, and limited partners are usually high net worth individuals, family offices. So a family office is, someone that has made a lot of wealth that is now really institutionalized their own wealth, and they have individuals that work for the family, and they deploy that in all different areas. Typically, that is almost like ultra high net worth family, or families that have started businesses and they've created a lot of wealth. I don't know if there's a family. I'm sure there's a family office, but like say Coca-Cola, they probably have a venture arm where they have a whole that family, the Coca-Cola, whatever it is, I don't even know, but they probably invest into venture funds and allocate into venture as just one pillar of their investment strategy. And then also that there's also funds of funds that invest into venture funds, which is a little bit more complicated, but funds of funds are basically funds that invest in other funds. So that may be a little bit more complicated, but basically you have somebody that attracts, say, a family office, and their thesis is, I'm going to invest in early stage AI funds. And this individual will go out and find early stage AI funds and be LPs into their AI funds. It's a little bit more complicated. And then also LPs can consist of founders that have had really amazing exits, executives, anyone that can really write a larger check than an angel check would be considered an LP. And essentially how the math works is the general partners of the fund, so if there's two general partners in the fund, usually the partners split the carry 50% each. So basically the LPs get 80% of the winnings, and then the GPs get 20% of the winnings. And then say if you have two partners, you both split that 20%, so 10% each. And what I mean by carry, that means that when there's exits and liquidity events, that's on the carry piece. And then there is a small management fee that the GPs get for their daily work and stuff like that, to travel and to turn the lights on at their house and whatnot. Which in VC, unless you work for late stage growth funds, the management fees aren't crazy because it's really all about the carry. And that's typically how the inner workings kind of work of a VC fund. And then you have this pool of capital. So say you have $10 million. You create basically almost like a roadmap of the fund, like that you do for the startup. It's for the fund. So you say, I'm going to invest in 40 companies, and you're going to put $200,000 into each company. So you're going to have 40 bets, and you then put parameters on okay, well, we're going to invest less than $10 million, and we're going to invest in less than $10 million valued businesses, meaning the valuation's under 10 million, and I'm just fictitiously saying that, and then you have these parameters, and we're going to invest in these sectors, and that's pretty much how it works. So my job is, I have a pool of capital, and my thesis is invest in sector agnostic. My fund's sector agnostic, so I invest in all industries, and I invest that pre-seed seed, so that's really less than $1 million into the $1 million rounds. And I invest between $250,000 to $300,000 into these companies, and I have 45 bets right now. And that's typically how it works.
So that's so cool. I'm just thinking about when you moved from a founder to a VC. How was that experience for you, moving from changing the sides to the table?
So what's interesting is that I don't think I publicly have said this either, but I've always wanted to be a VC because I love talking to people. I love meeting all different founders. I love just looking at all different types of industries and businesses. But there is different stages of venture capital. I'm speaking from an early stage venture capital lens. Obviously, there's all the way, growth stage, which is pre-IPO or beyond. in my world at early stage, and I built my own fund, I still feel like I am a founder, but I get to be a part of everyone's journey, and I have a small piece of that journey. Not even from a financial perspective, but from an actual, like, I get to wake up and like have all these different conversations about all these different industries, and I think that is awesome. But my skill set is I've diligenced myself enough to know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And late stage venture is very, very, very analytical, and that is not my strong suit. My strong suit is getting something from 0 to 1, building relationships, finding diamonds in the rough, and just going at light speed just to get to the next step. And my skill sets from my founder journey has correlated very well to early stage, whereas I don't think right where I'm at in my life right now that would correlate well to late stage venture capital. So the transition has been somewhat, it's different building a venture firm than obviously a startup, but there is the same mechanics and skill sets I still use, because I think also I'm building the fund from the ground up. If I were to go enter a fund, it probably would have been a little bit different. But it's very much the same thing. Like basically, I have a seed round. I raise from LPs. It's the same concept. I have a pitch deck. I have to sell a story. I have to go on LinkedIn and meet people and build a network and get advice, and I have to do all of that. And my traction is basically the companies that I invest in hopefully are growing. So that's how I show traction. Does this make sense?
No, I love that. It's so cool. It's like understanding that venture capitalist building the fund is also a founder, and it's also that founder mindset is just something you can apply to everywhere in life.
Yeah, I mean, like I mean, you're the director of your own life. Like, you write the script, and like I think that your whole life is being a founder. You're always doing new things. You're always launching new things. You're always growing. You're always shedding skin. You're always, changing as an individual. And if you live life, in my eyes, if you live life waking up every day passionate and providing value to the world and actually doing what you want to do, which is way easier said than done, then I think that you'll be so much more happier, and you'll be able to just live just a way cooler, and just enjoy life a lot more.
Fulfilled.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that people say my time as a founder was very in that grow at all costs stage. And it's interesting because they say you should have work-life balance, but I think that it's what's interesting to me now is that why do they call it work-life balance? It should be just balance and work, right? Or life and work, right? Why does the work have to come first? And I think that's interesting because I think a lot of founders think that there's this hustle culture. There's this you got to grind 24 hours a day to build an amazing business and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, you have to go hard. But I think if you go hard at what you're passionate about and what you want to exist in the world, it really doesn't feel like work. And that may sound crazy to most people, and it was crazy for me when I went through a lot of this stuff. But if you truly love what you're doing and the relationships that you're building along that journey, it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, this doesn't feel like work. This is so much fun.
Yeah, exactly. I could talk about this for all day, all night. But I think a lot of people don't they put money on a pedestal, and I did that. I put my early days. I put money on a pedestal where I was I gotta make money. And yes, you need to survive. You have responsibilities. But anyway, I know we talked about this off camera, but doing doing what you love and building something that you love to do and going within and building from passion, the money just organically just flows to you, right? That's why they call it liquidity. It just flows.
I love that. Liquidity because it flows. What about leading around versus taking part in a round? How different is that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think when you're a full-time fund manager and you're building an empire and a brand and you want to raise multiple funds, leading rounds you have to do because it allows you to, get the rights that you want and more ownership, and it shows that you have the ability to source and you have the ability to build around. So like when I mean build around as an adventure perspective, like yes, the founder is, raising that $1 million and you're convinced that this is the next big company. So you're going to say, I'm going to lead the round and we're going to put 300,000 out of that $1 million. But I'm going to help you close the round. So then my job is I'm going to go to angels, I'm going to go to other funds, and I'm going to provide amazing people around this round and help you close the round. And that allows me to be the lead investor where I have, like I said earlier, the more rights, I have more ownership and whatnot. And I think leading rounds show that you have the ability to scale as a fund and also as a fund manager. If you're just like investing and just getting slivers of rounds as a fund, I don't really consider that the person's probably not doing it full time, which is fine. But I'm doing this full time and I'm gonna have multiple funds and I'm creating a brand and whatnot. So, but the difference truly is like around like owning like having the rights, issuing the term sheet, having more ownership, and typically everyone else is just participating, which is totally fine, but they have a lot less equity in the round. And sometimes there's rounds that are called party rounds, which there is no lead. So it's basically, say you want to raise $500,000 and you just have a bunch of individuals that write you $25,000 checks and there's no lead. Which I think sometimes can hurt founders because there's not like a sense of like guidance or a North Star and stuff like that. I think that if you should get a lead, you should have somebody that sets terms, you should have somebody that issues, the proper term sheets, etc.
I love that. That's great insight. Before we wrap up, any advice for a founder who's raising their first round right now? Any students who are just getting into entrepreneurship, just built out their company and raising their first round, still figuring out what route they want to take?
Yeah, so again, I think that YC Startup School, it's all free, I believe, YC Startup School.
Yeah.
They have phenomenal information on raising, seed rounds, understanding like instruments on how to raise the round. So for an example, like the safe note, which is an agreement you send to the investors once they commit to you if you're, a US or Singapore-based startup. YC Startup School is a great database to get just a ton of information on it. So I highly recommend go to YC Startup School, read all of that. I think they have really good YouTube videos as well too. Start reaching out to angel investors on LinkedIn. So start sourcing, how I mentioned the whole Crunchbase hack, which you can rewind the podcast and go back and listen to that. Start building your network of angel investors. One thing that I did have realized in life is that the more access you have to capital, the more at-bats you have. So the more opportunities you can take. And that may not make sense now when I say that, but as you grow, the more people that can give capital to you, you'll have more opportunities at bat. And if you have more opportunities at bat, you have the highly likelihood of success. So start building your network, start reaching out to individuals. Also, reach out to founders that have raised capital before. So if you're in school, or if maybe they went to your school, or whatever the case may be, reach out to founders and get advice on how they raised their rounds. Ask for, how did you do it? How much did you raise? Why did you do that? Who did you raise from? And then maybe if you build a relationship with these individuals, ask for introductions. That's where I would start, 100%.
I love that. Thank you so much for taking our time.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Thank you. This was amazing.
Thank you.